everybody. Hello, Salt Lake City, and welcome to our April 8th City Council work session. I do have an agenda. Our meetings are open to the public, and you're welcome to join us in person by watching from the Council's agenda page, Zoom, YouTube, or SLC TV. We hope you'll continue to join us in whichever way you feel most comfortable. This is a work session during which there's no public comment. Please join us on April 15th during our 7 p.m. formal meeting to share your comments. Of course, you can always send your feedback to us by mail, via email at council.comments@slc.gov, or via our 24-hour phone comment line, 801-535-7654. Comments that we receive on agenda topics are shared with council members and posted on our website, slccouncil.com. We are at the first item on our work session agenda, which is an ordinance amending our mixed use or MU zone and potential consolidation and map amendment follow-up discussion. We've got Nick Tarbett, Council Deputy Director, Daniel Echeverria, Senior Planner, Chrissy Gilmore, Planning Manager, and Kelsey Lindquist, Planning Manager. Thanks for being here. All right, let's take it away.
Okay, we'll dive right in. Scott has a presentation up. This was briefed to the council on February 4th of this year, and out of that there was a couple questions. The council members asked for follow-up, and there were some meetings held to ask some of those questions as well. What we have before you today is a 5-page straw poll that we need to go through with the council members to get direction on these various outstanding policy items. So Scott has, or up on the big screen, is the list that planning provided, and it's very useful to have because it shows some pictures of some of the areas that will be discussed. But you should each have a handout that you can just go through line by line as we go through these. So I think what the plan is, we will just step through them, and then if you have any questions, staff is here to help answer anything you have questions on. So the first item, I guess, does that work? Is everybody okay with that plan? Mm-hmm. Okay.
I have a lot of questions, so.
The first item is to allow drive-through facilities for financial institutions in the Sugar House districts.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilmember.
Thanks. Councilmember Young asked that she's I think, giving a presentation as we speak at a conference. So she just wanted me to give some information on this. So she's talked with Sugar House Community Council leaders that support this. She believes that it will help elderly residents, and it was something that was requested as an exclusion when the original drive-through ordinance for Sugar House was passed. It's allowing financial institutions to maintain their drive-throughs. So it would be specific, my understanding is it's specific to financial institutions, not like fast food restaurants and I think the theory for that is that fast food restaurants tend to have longer queues that could interrupt traffic, but financial institutions do not. So she's hoping that we'll support that. Personally, I think that's fine and seems like a reasonable change.
My one. Just a question.
I'm not the chair.
Just a question on the. Are we limiting the number of lanes, or are we just basically saying market rate, and the developer will decide how many drive-through lanes they can have or will have, or?
I don't think there's actually a lane number restriction, but there are like queuing requirements. They have to actually accommodate so much queuing on site, and those were added recently. But there's not a lane limit. I guess the way we're approaching this would be just adding financial institutions, drive-throughs as an allowed use, without like a cap on the number of lanes necessarily.
It's just, and you say the queuing is, I mean, again, that's just all, you have to do a study and you have to figure out what that is, but it's basically they have to be queued up off of a public right away. Okay, yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Ms. Chair,
For a straw poll on this?
propose a straw poll that we support item 1.
Okay, share your feelings. Yep. All right, that's unanimous with 2 council members absent.
I am here, Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry.
And I'm a yes.
Okay, great. That is 6 yeses with 1 council member absent.
Okay, the second item would be to allow up to 150 feet in the Sugar House area, in the area identified on the map up on the big screen. This was also a request from Councilmember Young.
Yeah, so, okay, this would allow additional height. This is also Councilmember Young's, if it's okay, Mr. Chair. Additional height to match granary south of 21st South. More open space near the Monument Plaza, which is important to D7.
Okay, any questions? Any straw polls?
I'll just say that I think that Sugar House, that part of Sugar House is not adjacent to any small single-family residential or anything that would be impacted by additional height. Very well transit connected and really functions as our second downtown, so I think additional height's very warranted, personally.
I believe they prefer the term urban village.
Urban Village.
Mr. Chair, can I jump in on
Yes,
this one?
please.
So the question on this one is the granary allowance, the allowance for height in the granary area has some conditions on it. So there's a question of whether imposing those same conditions in the Sugar House or not imposing those conditions.
Where is
So-
that on the sheet?
It's on the screen.
Oh, so it is.
So
Member Young, give any guidance on that?
I do not have anything from Councilmember Young. I would say that, so in order to get the increased height in granary, Daniel, you're saying that I have to give 10% ground level open space and a mid-block walkway, affordable housing, or 100% commercial ground floor.
Yep, one of those three, plus the 10% ground level.
Are there exceptions for like entrances to parking lots on the ground floor and things like that?
Those would still apply.
Okay.
So again, it's the 10% and one of the 20% mid-block affordable housing or 100% commercial ground floor.
Correct.
Okay. I would lean towards a granary. If we were going to want to stay consistent within across the city, it would be the same limits as the granary if we're going to give them the height.
Is that a straw poll?
Yeah, that is a straw poll.
Okay, great. So it would be to allow up to 150 feet in Sugar House area with the conditions, the granary area conditions.
Yes.
Okay, any discussion to that? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that is unanimous with all six council members present and Councilmember Young absent. Okay,
Okay, item number 3 is to increase the height for row houses in MU 5, 6, 8, and 11 from 40 feet to 45 feet. Councilmember Mono, I believe this is one of yours.
Yeah, I think there are several council members that were approached by a few different people, developers trying to do taller 4-story row houses, and the request was that 40 feet was just a little bit limiting, so 45 feet gives a little bit more flexibility. And so it's currently only proposed, or like I think it's only appropriate in the zones that are 5 stories or more, so MU5 and above. MU2 and 3 would not allow 45 feet tall. But with that, I would ask, I think it's a good change. I would ask for the council support on that. So I'll propose a straw poll to support 3.
okay, any discussion? Okay, that is unanimous, or Councilmember Pui? Okay, that is unanimous with all 6 of us present voting in favor.
Item number 4 is to clarify vertical stacking is allowed in row houses. And the language would be amended, as you can see on the straw poll sheet, that it clarifies that it's residential units.
This is just something that our zoning ordinance made sense, but it says single family dwellings, which is defined in the building code a little bit differently than our zoning ordinance, so just changing the word single-family dwelling to residential units helps clarify that to what the intent, my understanding from Daniel, that the original intent was. So it doesn't change anything really, it just clarifies.
Is that a straw poll?
I propose a straw poll that we support number 4.
Okay, any discussion? None? All in favor? Or
Aye.
show your feelings? Okay, everybody, that's 6-0 as well.
Okay, item number 5 refers to pitched roof requirements in the MU2 and 3 zones. Right now, larger structures are required to match the roof types of the surrounding block face. This would remove that requirement from those zones.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Thank you for, okay, so this one and then item 6A, B, and C are all kind of related to a couple meetings that I had with planning. Thank you for your time in helping with that. I think that there were 2 sort of competing goals with this consolidation, both very valid goals. One was to keep as close to the existing land use, like what the current zoning allows, and the other was to consolidate into a more consistent and concise zoning code. And sometimes those things were at odds, and I think the next ones were my requests were to try and make them more consistent. So there are certain things where in very similar zones, like at MU2 versus an MU3 for the same land use, the setbacks could be very different. And so I was asking that we consolidate them to something a little more consistent. To put another way, if you were to look at our old zones and then what was without these next few changes, it would make sense why those were there. But once the old zones go away, if you were to look at our zoning ordinance without the next few changes, I think you'd be really confused as to why we're asking for 3 times as big of a setback in a very similar zone. So I think that would lead to more one-off rezone requests, because there's going to be something that's going to make sense in one zone, not another. So this is one of those things. MU3 was the only one that had a requirement for roof pitches to look similar to other buildings on the block face. And I'll just say that I think that there are people that would argue differently than me, but I don't actually think that to create a consistent neighborhood, the roofs have to look the same. I think it's more like bulk size and uses and things like that. So this would just remove that. It was only in MU3, not in any of the other zones.
And
Is that correct, or was it MU2 as well?
It was MU2 and 3.
Okay.
And Mike, and right now, if you just go to single family homes, right, you can have a flat rooftop, you can have a steep roof.
Correct.
The pitch can vary as you want. I mean, I guess there's some building code requirements as far as snowfall and strength, but you can have a flat or steep pitch in a single family. And you look in cities that have row houses in downtown cities, they have all sorts of different roof pitches, and so I'm in favor of allowing that diversity, I guess, or
Yeah.
difference.
That's correct. And I would also say that in a city like Salt Lake, where really we don't have a whole bunch of houses built at the same time, we already have a diversity of roof types. And so trying to say we want every house to have a gable roof doesn't make sense to me. I prefer a diversity of those things. And it just gives more flexibility. So I would propose a straw poll to support removing the language for roof pitch and height in MU2 and 3.
Right.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, I'll show your feelings, please. Okay, thumbs up from everybody. 6-0.
Okay, and then 6A, B, and C are all similar to what you were already just discussing, Councilmember Mono, where you're trying to make things more consistent between some of the zones. So we could go through these line by line, or I believe this on the big screen shows what the changes would look like in the code, if you want to be able to see that.
So, okay, do you want me to go through that, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah, so these ones were also from those meetings that planning had with me, and I appreciate their time again. So the first one is relating to open space with for the urban house, two-family, and cottage zone. There were some zones that required a certain amount of open space, and then of that open space, a certain amount of it needed to be vegetated, but some did not, and my request was to have them all require that amount of vegetation. Am I saying that right, Daniel? So that it was like sometimes we said you need open space, but it could all be plazas, and sometimes we said you need open space. 20% of that open space has to have a tree in it, and this would be putting that vegetation requirement in all of them. Is that accurate? Yeah.
Can you define vegetation? Because I'm thinking, is xeriscaping, how does that fit into the vegetation
I
side?
think it's the same as what we did in our landscape ordinance, which is that it's something green, but a tree canopy does count.
does.
It doesn't have to be grass.
Right.
It can and should be water-wise plants, and then the tree canopy counts as that as well.
Perfect.
Okay, so I'll propose another straw poll that we support 6A.
Okay, sorry, just 1 second. Okay, any discussion to that? Okay, that appears unanimous. Councilmember Pui? Yes, okay. So 6-0.
Okay, and then 6B is related to row house building types. So you'll remember that within each of these zones, we're allowing different building types. There's 4 different things in here. Let me make sure I'm understanding them all. So, hold on, let me get to the old one.
I look at the RMUs on our zoning map, and they don't break out into the numbers, do they? 'Cause
The
I don't
zoning
see
map
them here.
for-
Yeah.
So the one that's online won't have any of these because none of these exist except for MU8, right?
Because it's only showing me just MUs, but not any subset of MU.
Yeah,
Is
there's
that right?
on our website. Are you on the story map right now?
I'm on the Salt Lake City zoning map.
No. So you need to go to the planning project page. So
Okay.
you go to planning. And then you'll scroll down just a little bit. You'll see commercial and mixed use zoning district consolidation and a picture of Nick.
Okay.
And you'll click on project story map. There's a little link that's blue.
Okay. Okay. Going. There we go.
Okay. And then you'd want to click on the third option. How is the zoning map changing?
Yes.
And then you'll just scroll down and the map will populate.
Okay, sorry, it's taking a minute because I'm on my iPad, but keep going.
Okay.
I'm at least at the right place now.
All right. So the first item under row houses is in zones MU2/3 would be just to make those front yard setbacks consistent. And I see a pretty big break between MU3 and then MU5 and above, because really like MU3 is the size of a house or the size of things we see on like 9th South. And then MU5 and above tends to be, would be like what we're seeing along 4th South, much taller buildings. So currently MU3, 2 and 3 have slightly different languages for the front and corner side yard, both for the minimum and the maximum. The minimum is 5 in both, but MU3 allows things like plazas and outdoor dining to be included in the front yard, and MU2 does not, and I think those should be allowed in both. And then the the MU2 does not have a maximum, but MU3 does. And I'm advocating to eliminate the maximum in both. Typically, I would be against eliminating a maximum front yard setback because we want buildings to address the street and be close to the sidewalk. But in MU2 and 3, there's a lot of those are, like if you travel along 9th South, there's a lot of old single-family homes that have turned into commercial spaces, and those might already have a larger than 20-foot setback, and it may make sense to allow that to continue for even new buildings. So that's why I think eliminating it for item 2 makes more sense. Okay, and then I'll keep going. This is for the rear yard in those ones. MU11 right now is the only zone that requires only a 5-foot rear yard setback for townhouses, whereas the rest of the larger zones require a 10-foot. And just to keep consistent, it would be making them all to 10. So I'd be increasing the rear yard setback in MU11. And then again, the open space would be 10% open space with 20% vegetation, which was kind of all over the board in those.
Can you explain more about like the practical reasons other than just consistency?
Well, I guess for me, consistency is important. Just looking at it, I think practically for the front and corner side yard setbacks, we're saying in MU3 you're allowed to have take a house or build a small building that's a restaurant and have a little plaza in front. MU2 you can't have a plaza, and I don't see why we wouldn't allow MU2 to have a plaza.
I see.
As well as the same way that we do in MU3. MU2, for the maximum setback, we're saying MU2, you can be further than 15 feet back to be in line with potentially whatever other buildings are on the street, or if you want a bigger outdoor dining area. But MU3, you may not. And so we're adding more flexibility in for both of those. In the case that they want to use their front yards. No one's going to make a bigger front yard setback unless they're going to use it for something, or if that's the pattern of the neighborhood and they just want to be consistent. So I think both of those add flexibility for people to do what we would otherwise want them to do.
Can I ask about MU11?
Yeah.
It looks like on this chart here that the front and corner side yards, with the exception of those very specific geographical areas, is 5 feet. It looks like the intention was to be able to use more of the lot in an MU11 comprehensively, the front and the back, except for those geographic areas match at 5 feet. Are we violating some sort of intent by moving the back yard to the rear yard to 10 feet to match the other MU zones? There's smaller lots. Is there bigger buildings?
That was the intent for MU11, but 5 feet isn't really that much of a difference, I guess. So it's not a
I
substantive.
anticipate there will be a developer for whom 5 feet is the difference between doing anything we want as a city and nothing we want as a city. So I'd like to get out ahead of
I
that.
think, Councilor Petro, that's a good question. I think the reason why I was saying in this case, I was trying to be not always creating lower setbacks and more height with these with the goal of making things more consistent. I was just trying to create consistency. And in that case, most of those zones were 10 feet and only one was 5. So I was erring on that side of increasing it to create consistency rather than saying I want consistency, but I always want more development, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I guess I was trying to balance those things. That one I'm less set on. If the council doesn't feel good about 6B number 3, I'm not going to fight you on that. That seems.
I don't know if I necessarily feel, I value your expertise and insight on this to a degree that I will never be able to accomplish. But I don't want to inadvertently cut feet out from under us if there was an intention there with that 5 foot.
I don't know. I don't know that I know what the intention would have been enough to. So, Mr. Chair, if it's okay, maybe I'll call for a straw poll on items 1 and 2. The front and corner side yard. 1, 2, and 4. The front and corner side yard setback, minimum and maximum, and open space for row houses to create consistency there. And we can do number 3 separate.
Okay. Okay, looks like we have thumbs up from everyone here except Councilmember Pui. I can't see your screen all of a sudden. If you're there. Do you see him there? Oh. Is he holding up his thumbs? Oh. Councilmember Pui, how are you on this one? It's
Hi,
6B, 1, 2, and 4.
I'm a thumbs up. I'm trying to
Okay. So
trying
that's,
to do this on.
oh, there you are. Okay, great. Okay, so we have a yes on 1, 2, and 4.
Can Councilmember Peter, could you explain your concern there? Because this was just on the rear yard going to 5 instead of the front yard.
Yeah, so if you look at his consistency was kind of horizontally across that map. But if you look vertically under MU11,
Yeah.
under the front and corner side yard, 5 feet is the general rule, 10 feet is the exception to the rule in those geographical areas.
Right.
So I was wondering if we're looking for a congruent standard, is it really beneficial for us to go horizontally across that chart, or should we be considering the vertical?
Okay, so you could also
I'm not sold either way on it, and like Daniel said, like, is 5 feet gonna matter? But
there could be a straw poll, make the front corner side yards 10 feet for all 4 of them across the board. And
well, I was thinking, my question was, because the 5 foot was the standard, the 10 foot was the exception to the rule, and then because the 5 foot was the rear yard expectation, if we adjust to 10 feet, are we violating some intent? It seems like the MU11 was supposed to be a gentle bump, right? To give us more opportunity to create bigger buildings, to use more of a lot. And so that's why I just wanted to visit that question before we straw polled it, because I am in favor of letting us use as much as possible right now to
Right.
get as much as we can.
But also this side of the zoning, the MU11, this is for MU11 row houses, not for big buildings, just the row houses.
That's correct.
So I'm almost like thinking of if you want consistency, the consistency for row houses, no matter what MU you're in, should be the same.
Unless we're talking about smaller lots potentially, where 5 feet could be a significant
But-
difference, or,
But I think MU11 would have the larger lots. No, they could still be the same, right, for the row house?
because they could be the side row, right? Like if it was a deep lot or something that,
So
which is
just-
what we tend to have in Fair Park is those deeper lots that are narrow.
I mean, it is 5 feet, but that's still a big difference on some of these houses. But it also, if everything else is 10 feet across the other ones, and these row houses, I'm almost more of the opinion of make all of them 10 feet across the board for the front corner, side yards, and the rear yards. Make them all 10.
Chelsea, what were you gonna say?
I was just going to ask for clarification on your question. So you have concerns if we have the 5 feet, that's kind of the standard, and then it bumps up to 10 on some of these larger corridors. The developer is going to be concerned about adding the additional 5 feet, or just making
No,
it.
I'm just wondering if we are inadvertently, I think the point is well made, to keep things as consistent as possible, to keep your job as easy as possible. I'm just worried that consistency takes away a tool in a toolbox for us or makes something less attainable at this point. I don't know. I've seen feet make a difference by this point, so I don't want to bind us unnecessarily.
I guess my thought is that in MU11, if someone's choosing to develop row houses, they're already choosing to develop far below their maximum building potential, because that could go up to 100 and, well, in some cases, 150 feet. So we're not really saying you can't, we're not really limiting development potential by an act of the city. We're just saying if you're choosing to build within this building typology, these are the standards wherever you're building it. I don't know. I think it's a totally debatable thing.
And that's where I kind of go back to the consistency side of the house, because these are, again, consistently row houses. And I think Darren's point of Councilmember Mono's point about you're going to build a row house at 40 feet where you could actually build something at 125 plus feet at the same place, but you're deciding to go a row house at 40 feet for some reason. So
That's why I'm kind of,
that's where I would go.
I do not have the experience you have, but it does feel like the 5 feet would apply to a smaller lot, right? If there's a bigger lot where you can go higher and do something. But if we're working on one of the smaller lots in like the Fair Park area that would give you this ability and you would do those side-facing row homes, it feels like 5 feet could make a difference, but.
I mean, there's always a project, there's always a case where it could.
Yeah.
Can I just make a straw poll and we'll just go from there? I say we'd make a straw poll. My straw poll is that we make the front corner and the rear yard setbacks at 10 feet across all 4, 5, 6, 8, and 11.
Okay, let me look at that real quick. Front and corner and rear. Okay, so that's a little different than what's on our paper.
Yeah, on the sheet right now, it's just the rear yards, which is
Okay.
10 feet. But I'll add the front and corner side to make it 10 feet across the board without the 5 foot on all sides, on all other streets. Make it 10 feet across the board.
Can I ask if staff has any concerns about that?
Yeah.
Just because we didn't talk about that when I was
Yeah.
meeting with them.
So we're talking about the row house front corner side yard.
Yes.
And rear
Okay.
yard.
And the rear yard. Okay, so the MU11 is special because it is mapped on some of these streets. And we do want a greater setback on some of these streets just because of how close they can be to traffic, essentially. So giving pedestrians some breathing room from a building and the street. And then the 5 feet, there are a bunch of other streets that it's mapped on where it's not necessarily the same case. And we do want people to use more of the property, essentially, in the MU11. It's like Sugar House. 10 feet away isn't really necessary in the Sugar House area versus some of these other streets.
All right, then I'll retract my straw poll and just go with the 10 feet across the rear yard setback and make the front corner side yard as is. So the straw poll is 10 feet across the rear yard on all 4 of them for consistency. Just what you basically.
Is there any discussion to that?
Are we still on 6B3? Just making sure.
6B3.
Okay.
6.
Can you repeat it once more? Sorry, I was listening to you, but then
It
I
would be
lost
to
track of Dan.
take the rear yard setback for MU11 and match it to 5, 6, and 8 at 10 feet.
Okay, yes.
Okay. So show your feelings on that, everyone.
I'm ambivalent.
I'm gonna
It's probably fine, but I don't.
And
I'm gonna join you. We have Councilmember Pui's a thumbs up, so we have a 4-2.
okay.
Okay.
Okay, and the next section is the last of, I think, the ones that I was working on, and those are for vertical mixed-use storefront multifamily, which is the larger of the building types. So for front and corner side yard, we have 5 feet in MU2 and 0 feet in MU3 and my thought was that we make those both consistent at 5 feet. And then in MU 5, 6, and 8, they're kind of all over the board. There's some that are 0 feet if it's non-residential, 10 feet if it's residential, some that are just 10 feet, and others that are, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's 5 and 6 are 0 feet non-residential, 10 feet residential. So if you're doing like a restaurant or a coffee shop, you can come up closer to the front. If you're doing all residential, you can pull further back. MU8 does not have that. It's just 10 feet. And so my request would be to put that consistent across 5, 6, and 8. I'll add a little bit of context to that. I do think that that requirement gets people to put commercial spaces on their mixed use projects, because that's one of the hardest things we have is developers really will write their performa so that they don't want to deal with commercial space. But if we're designating these areas, we want mixed use and we want commercial spaces, we need to make it, we need to put those incentives in for them to add in commercial space. Otherwise, they're not going to do it. So this is the one that I think is actually the most important, is to give that incentive for, if you're doing commercial space, we'll let you come up closer. If you're only doing residential, it moves a little bit further back. I think in projects that I've worked on and looked at, it really does incentivize the construction of commercial spaces, which is hard for us to get. It's not something that the market is wanting to do of their own choice. So that would be the front and corner side yards for that. The front and corner side yard maximum, right now we have, again, this is the same as with the smaller zone. We have no maximum in MU2, but we do have it in MU3. So again, being consistent with that and not putting a maximum. And 5, 6, and 8 applying the maximum from 5 and 6 to MU8. So MU8 in this case is a bit of an anomaly, and I'd like 5 and 6 to match 8.
And on that one, so on the front, on the max, we make MU3 0, like 5, MU2 is.
Correct.
The front corner side yard.
Oh, front corner side yard max. It's not 0. It's just there's no max.
There's no max. Excuse
Yeah.
me. Yeah, no max. I mean, there's no max.
And then MU8 again matches MU5 and 6
Right.
in that if it's residential, it's a 20-foot max. If it's non-residential, it's a 10-foot max.
Right.
Except North Temple and 4th South, we're allowing them to be a little further away, just since they're really busy streets without much of a park strip on there. Am I understanding that right? Yeah.
So is your rationale behind this that the value of the land is such that no, we're not going to live to regret this by giving no maximum?
Oh, you're talking about on the maximum setback?
In the places where you're removing maximums, your
I don't
philosophy is that the value of the land is such that no one's going to be able to afford to do something that would violate.
If anyone's building to the maximum, they're doing it for a specific purpose. I would think, like adding a plaza or matching their neighbors, or that they're on a really big road and they really need some buffering. And so I don't think no one's asking for a bigger maximum just because. The answer to your question is yes,
Okay.
now that I've sort of processed it in my head.
By eliminating the maximum doesn't mean that they couldn't build more than the minimum. It just doesn't limit the amount of the maximum. Does that make sense? So there's a little bit of leeway by eliminating a definitive maximum.
I think that one thing, we're still not allowing things like parking in front of the building. So it's not like by eliminating the maximum, we're going to get a bunch of parking lots in front of buildings in these dense urban zones. So it's not, all of those other things still apply. So it would be really like someone wants to build a plaza in front of their project, and they would have to come in for a special exception to do that. But I don't think that a lot of people are going to build to their maximum. It's just not where the value of land is right now.
We just haven't seen people maxing out their density yet. And so it does make me a little nervous if we're trying to push people to make the most of land right now to densify, especially with the economic pressures of interest rates being sticky, cost of labor and materials being not just high but unknown. Like are we creating a permission structure for some laziness or for things that we're going to want to undo in 20 years? But this,
I don't think so.
okay, I trust you on that.
I don't think so because we're not allowing parking lots in front
Okay.
of buildings and things like
I
that.
trust you.
They have to be active uses or landscape.
Okay.
The other two in 6C are merging the rear yard language for MU 2 and 3. And then again, that same one of open space requiring 10% open space with 20% of it to be vegetated. I saw Nick Norris.
Can you explain when you say merge the rear yards on 2 and 3? Because 2 says none except 20 feet when abutting a residential district. 3 says 10 feet except 20 feet when abutting basically residential districts. So is it really just going to be 3's language into 2? Into
Actually, I don't remember which one we went with.
Yeah, so I'm not sure why we put a budding residential district in the 2. The intent was to move those all to specifically designated zones so that it's easy for zoning reviewers to say
Yeah.
specific, this zone, you
So
need 20
basically
feet.
taking 3's rear yard setback and making it into 2's. Okay. That's
So-
how it,
2 changes to match 3.
2 changes to match 3.
Is that what we had talked about?
For the exceptions, yeah, for the 20 feet, yeah.
Yeah.
20-foot exceptions? Yeah.
So it's 10 feet except 20 feet when abutting R1, 2, da da da. Okay.
Yep.
So 3's language into MU2's rear yard setback also. Okay. And then my second question is, you say rear yard merge, oh no.
That's the one you just looked at.
Yeah, that was the one. My other question was go back to the very first one, the front corner side yard minimums. In the first bullet point of the of our sheet, it says MU2, MU3, make both consistent, apply the 5-foot minimum. I understand that. But then the next line says MU2 standard to MU3.
That just means that MU2 is currently asking for a 5-foot minimum. MU3 was not. So we're applying the MU2 to the MU3 zone.
Apply the MU2 standard to MU3. I was reading it differently. I was thinking MU2 is going to be MU3. Then I was like, these are contradictory. So, okay, gotcha. Okay, that clears it up for me. Thanks.
Okay. So I think that would be, the straw poll would be to support all of those things in 6C. That's my straw poll.
My thumb is up.
Okay, great. Thank you, Councilmember Pui. I think thumbs up for all of us on that. And unfortunately, that is all the time that we have allotted for this. But we can go a little bit longer.
The next chunk are things that planning staff recommended, and there are a lot of cleanup ones, so they might be faster. I'm probably not the best person to explain them, though.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we have enough time to go a little bit over on this, but
Okay, we'll go
not gonna
quick.
make it through 20, the rest. Not gonna make it to 25 or 4 or whatever.
Okay, number 7 would,
18, sorry.
there's like
Just have to get
32.
3 times as much done as we've gotten done right now.
These are distinct subparts. And so,
So item number 7 would be to add the use contractor yard / office indoor to the transitional overlay as a conditional use.
Yeah.
Let's straw poll that.
okay, that looks like a thumbs up from all of us. Councilmember Pui? Is your thumb up?
It is up.
Okay, excellent. So that is a thumbs up from 5 of us. Councilmember Lopez Chavez had to step out. Okay,
Do you want to explain this with Daniel?
So we have a list of enhanced active use streets. There were some that were mistakenly added to that list where they're really not very viable streets for very active uses like retail restaurant. So that's Richard Street by 1700 South, and then 400 South between the rail overpass and I-15, where it's pretty much just a pedestrian dead zone.
Support for 8.
I think, Councilmember Pui, support for number 8.
It is, yes.
Okay, that's 5-0 as well. Okay,
Excuse me. Number 9, this would delete the requirement for a 6-foot between multiple buildings that are over 75 feet in facade length. Staff recommends changing this, removing this.
why did we have that in the first place? Is that like a fire thing?
It's a good question. Potentially could be used for mid-walk walkways when there's actually a viable path for mid-walk walkway, but they end up being a pathway to the rear property line that
Okay.
doesn't serve a purpose, so.
Support for this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we have support for this. Councilmember Pui?
We already have 4. We don't need him.
Thank you for babysitting me. It's a yes.
Yes, okay. I'm sorry, I can't see you, so I have to ask the universe.
No, it's really helping me. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we're on number 10.
Okay, number 10. So ground vegetation can be substituted with tree canopies in most of these zones. The exceptions are downtown and gateway, where the tree canopy cannot count. This is recommended to make the same requirement to the MU 8 and 11.
Yeah, and this is just because of the MU8 and 11 have narrower streets that, it's essential to have that pedestrian comfort with the tree canopy coverage.
So I actually have a question on this one, Mr. Chair. We're saying in those higher density, more downtown-ish zones, tree canopy cannot count, which would therefore mean you'll see more shrubs and flowers and potentially turf or things like that.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And that makes sense to staff because, help me understand.
It's because of the high intensity streets that these are mapped across, and providing some more ground level buffering between pedestrians and the street.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also,
This is
typically
park strip,
higher
not
buildings
landscaping.
as well.
What's
So,
that?
typically higher buildings as well in the MU8 and
Okay.
MU11.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Councilmember Hui, number 10.
I'm a yes.
Okay, that's 5-0.
Okay, number 11 would be to add a transition period for when this is adopted. This is helpful since this is such a large project and so many properties are being caught up in it. Some developers are already halfway through a process, and so they would like to have that be able to know that they can either finish with the one they're currently under. So that's what the time extension, a delayed adoption of like 3 to 6 months, you guys think is right?
Yeah, we're recommending 3 months.
You're recommending 3? Okay.
I know that it is a headache for you all every time we do transition periods like this. I would like to give you more of a headache. I actually would like to even include some building permits that have started, that this adjustment, like these seem like very proactive, forward-looking things that we want to encourage in our city. So for projects that are even in permitting, I would like to make this even retroactive and give a grace period for people to change to this new zone as opposed to the one that they may have submitted under.
So we could allow people to change over to these zones.
Apologize,
but
I acknowledge what a headache that is.
we just can't retroactively impose, because once they've submitted permits, they're essentially vested under the current zone and they can proceed under the current zone.
And
Or-
I understand that we can't compel. Can we offer an option to switch?
Yeah, they can willingly switch anytime.
I would be interested in something that allows them to opt into the new zoning.
So what we could have is a transition period where they have 3 months where people can still apply under the old zone, but then can still apply under the new zones as well during that 3. So
That's what I
two
would
options.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
ask for.
Right. That's how I
Is-
read it.
And I know that we did something differently, and I think it was RMF 30 or whatever, when we just said the old one goes for 6 months and then the new one starts. And I realize this is more, you're having to manage 2 zones for a couple months, but I think it's important to allow the new zoning to be effective immediately, because there have been several people that have reached out and said, look, we have been waiting for this. We have projects ready to go. We're just sitting on this land until you do this. So yes, allowing developers that are already in the process 3 more months to vest in the old zoning, if that's more beneficial to them. But I don't want to wait to make this, to implement this, if that's possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that a
So
straw
it's
poll?
3 months. Okay, so my straw poll is that we allow the old zone a 3-month grace period from the time we adopt for the old zoning to be used, but also that the new zoning becomes effective immediately. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, the option.
Okay.
And can we make it available to those,
And-
those who are already in permitting a
And
chance to
yeah, I think that would.
vest using the new zone to switch?
Yeah.
Yeah, so people that are already in permitting could also change their permit to apply under the new zone.
Yeah.
They could definitely do that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, all right. We got a 5-0 on that one. That's probably where we need to end for today. So let's move on to, thank you so much for being here and walking us through all that. Okay, we're now to item number 2, which is an alley vacation near 2680 South Chadwick. Oh,
Thank
okay,
you, Mr.
great.
Chair.
Yes, we have Brian Fulmer joining us online, Council Policy Analyst. We also have Benjamin Buckley, Principal Planner, and we still have
You're okay. Chrissy Gilmore.
Chrissy Gilmore is with us as well. Sorry.
This is a proposal to vacate a north-south city alley between Chadwick and Beverly Streets, which is about 1400 east, and between 2700 south and approximately 2615 south. The alley is blocked in several locations and is impassable. I'll turn it over to Ben.
Thank you, Brian. As Brian just said, that this is a alley vacation request at 2680 South Chadwick. Next slide, please. The request is to vacate the entire portion of the north-south alley. The alley starts about 140 feet south of Stratford Avenue, and it runs all the way to 2700 South. It's approximately 12 feet wide by 810 feet wide or long. 27 of the 32 abutting property owners have signed on to the petition. The petition requires 75%. 27 of 32 is 84%. Planning Commission heard this request back in January and recommended a positive recommendation. Next slide, please. Some history of this alley and some background on some enforcement that is going on. The alley was platted in 1909 as part of Highland Park Plat A. That plat did have quite a few alleys, but very few alleys in the general vicinity remain public to this day. This specific alley has significant overgrown vegetation, fencing, random structures, utility poles, etc., that run through the middle of it. There is a lengthy enforcement case on the Chadwick side of this alley. Every property on Chadwick that abuts this alley is under enforcement for encroachments. What happened was the applicant for this alley vacation applied for a garage permit. The legal descriptions on this permit gave them 6 extra feet that was not theirs. The permit was granted and issued with those 6 extra feet. And so the garage is 3 feet over the property line. And then the applicant then built a shed onto the back of the garage, which encroaches even further into the alley. So while it was permitted, the legal descriptions and the measurements on the permit did not line up, and it was not caught. Next slide, please. The left picture here is the garage and the shed on the back of it. You can also see a cinder block wall that runs through the alley. You can also notice significant lack of care and paving and maintenance of the alley. So it has been not used for quite a while. Next slide, please. Alley vacations must satisfy one of 4 policy considerations in Chapter 1452.020. Those are lack of use, public safety, urban design, or community purpose. Next slide, please. And this one satisfies the lack of use consideration. Lack of maintenance, again, has caused it to deteriorate. It's not used. Limited accessibility. As you can see from that photo there, that is the alley at 2700 South. Not quite sure where you can access it from there. There's utility poles, more sheds, garages, things like that. Next slide, please. Just a refresher on the alley vacation process. Planning Commission heard this in early January and forwarded a positive recommendation. City Council, you will hear and decide on it yourself. And then if it is approved, the alley will just be split straight down the middle and given half to each property owner that abuts it. Next slide, please. That's all I got for you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilmember Romano.
I know I often am unsupportive of alley vacations. I think this is a different situation. I don't see how we could ever reopen that alleyway. So in this case, I'm supportive of it. I do want to make clear for the record, and Mark, if I say something you disagree with, please chime in. But I don't think that us vacating this alleyway is going to resolve all of the conflicts between neighbors. I think that in almost every, I've just looked down at the map. I haven't obviously walked to people's backyard, but I think in almost every case, the fence is going to be somewhere other than the very middle of that alleyway, which is where we're going to split the property line and give the property to each of the abutting neighbors. So there's going to be a lot of people that have fences over their property line on their neighbor's property line. And I just want to make clear for the record, that's not something that the city is going to resolve. That's going to be a private resolution between 2 property owners. I just so the people that live on those streets know that if we approve this alley vacation, we're not also going to go in and
Right, this does not resolve the enforcement cases. It's up to the property owners to figure out how to resolve those, whether it's a lot line adjustment, buying parts of your neighbors.
So in some cases, it might
correct
resolve that, but that's not going to be something that is known until a survey is done, and it's going to be one neighbor having to buy property from the other or removing a fence and putting it in the correct place.
Yes.
And so this is not in any way us saying we, the city, are going to pay for your new fence or anything like that. I just want to make that clear for the record.
Yes, correct. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, just a follow-up question on that. Some of these properties looks like they've built a structure up to that alleyway line. Does the rear yard setback still have to be enforced of whatever it is, 10 feet or 20 feet?
Yes.
So if they have a structure that's now within that area, they have to also remove it, or how does that work?
Yeah, so if it's possible, if we go back to the picture of the garage and the shed off of the back, that shed would still need a foot setback from their rear property line. If that makes sense.
They'll have to remove the shed. most likely.
Yeah, or figure out a solution with their rear neighbor.
Again, going back to Councilmember Mono, in this case, that would be a city violation. In the other one, it would be like, hey, two property owners have to decide where their fence has to be. Correct? Mm-hmm. Okay.
So this property in particular, it would, because the alley's 12 feet wide, they would get 6 feet. This likely abuts further than 6 feet into the alley, and so they would need more space to make that a legal shed.
I don't have any other questions.
I don't have any questions. Councilmember Pui, do you have any questions?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just add that I have a similar philosophy to alleys as Councilmember Mono, but I think this is fits into one of the exceptions where I just don't think that there's a way to feasibly make this work given the other issues. So I would vote in support of it this time. Okay. Do you need a straw poll or anything from us?
No, I don't think
Okay.
so. I think we've had enough of those.
Great,
No, just
thanks.
kidding.
Awesome, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, sorry. We are at the third agenda item, which is an informational update on our Sister Cities program for 2024. At the table, we'll have Austin Kimmel, Council Policy Analyst, Katie Matheson, Communications and Diplomacy Officer, and Ross Chambliss, Sister Cities Board Chair. Thanks for being here. Good to see you.
All right, thanks, council members. I just have a quick introduction to let you know that Economic Development is here to provide the council with an annual Sister Cities update. They put together a report which provides an overview of the program's goals and priorities going forward. It also contains a look back at the 2024 accomplishments and updates the City Council on Salt Lake City's 6 sister cities. This is an informational briefing, as you mentioned, and it does not require any council action. Policy questions can be found on page 1 of the staff report, and with that, I will turn it over to Economic Development.
All right, thank you so much for having us. My name is Katie Matheson. I'm the Communications and Diplomacy Officer for Economic Development. I have with me my board chair, Ross Chambliss. We're very excited to be here today with a prop. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go over a little bit of what we've done in the past year, and then I'll go over some of the goals that we're still working on. As you'll remember, a little bit of history. This program was somewhat dormant for a while, and in 2022 we brought it back. We came before you, had an adjustment to the ordinance, and we have a new board, and so 2024 was really our first kind of year when we were getting our feet under us and executing on some goals. One of the biggest things that we did in 2024, which we'll talk about a little bit later, is Mayor Mendenhall and Councilmember Mono led a delegation visit to our oldest sister city in Matsumoto, Japan. That happened in October. And we'll have some pictures on that later. We also filled a few board seats in District 2 and 7. We had an incredible visit from 4 high school students from our sister city in Matsumoto, Japan, visit us this summer for a program that is 3 decades long, and Ross will speak more to that. Thanks to your support, we were able to secure some more funding for the program, and one of my personal favorite surprises from this year was that we were able to reconnect with our sister city in Chernivtsi, Ukraine, in spite of the war that's going on right now. We were able to attend some trainings. We updated and reviewed our process for when we receive applications for a new sister city, and we engaged our local arts community in a gift exchange with Matsumoto, Japan. Next slide. Still things that are ongoing. We're still looking for youth representation on our advisory board. We have a few board openings. So if any of you folks know some folks who want to be engaged, that would be wonderful. We're in the process right now of digitizing the 66 years of documentation about this program. Thanks to our new staff member, Mariah, who is with us. She is taking on that huge task. And of course, always meeting with community members, subcommittee annual planning, and then the ongoing process of organizing our gift collection, some of which you see out here on the 3rd floor. Next slide. So now I'm going to get into each of our 6 sister cities and talk through some of the things that we've done. This is a picture of myself and our other staff member, Josh, who we tabled at Festa Italiana. Next slide, please. Next. There we go. I'm going to give you just one highlight from the year. We were able to, like I said, table at Festa Italiana, celebrate Italian culture. Council chair at the time, Petro, introduced the headliner at Festa Italiana and talked about our sister cities, particularly our relationship with Torino, Italy. One of the biggest questions that we got when we were tabling from the community, besides people saying, I had no idea that we had a relationship with Italy, or I didn't know we had a sister cities program, was, so I'm going to go to Europe and I've decided I'm going to stop by Torino because we have a sister city there. Where should we go? And one of I vamped because I didn't have any real recommendations for them. But one of the things that I did ask is, if you happen to go and you have a flag of Salt Lake City, will you take a picture of yourself with Salt Lake City flag holding it up in Torino? I also want to point to our prop that we have here. We, with the help of our incredible engagement team at the city, had this map made, and one thing that we asked folks to do was pin where their family is from. Utah's very proud of our cultural heritage, and I did count these. There's over 200, so folks would come up and talk with us about where their family is from, how they're connected to Italy. And it was super cool. This is still up in my office. And later this year, actually in 2 weeks, we're going to be tabling at Nihon Matsuri, which is the Japanese festival. And we are going to bring a similar map and have folks pin where their family is from. Next slide. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Ross.
All right, thank you, Katie. Members of the council, it's really good to see you all again. So just to fill in a few details about some of the main events last year regarding our relationship with Matsumoto. As Katie mentioned, there was a reciprocal visit led by Councilman Mano and Mayor Mendenhall and around 20 members of the delegation from Salt Lake to go. This was kind of a response from Matsumoto's visit in 2023, from Mayor Gaon, who came and visited here for a few days. It was a very wonderful visit. I mean, of course, they were very gracious hosts. We got to see their recently completed city museum, which is beautiful and kind of inspiring to see what a city can do as far as creating the story of itself. And also we were able to see various local businesses, a miso factory, a local craft brewery factory. It was really inspiring to see how they have so many local arts and crafts events that, similar to what we have here, arts festivals and music festivals. And so I think we came away with a lot of inspiration and ideas as far as potential exchanges that we could have with Matsumoto going forward. Also, just some really interesting ideas. I think Dee Brewer, who is one of our with the delegation, came away with a lot of observations of good use of urban space management that could be inspiring for ideas up here in our own city. And the other event that happened last year regarding Japan that Katie mentioned is we had a group of students, a small group, about 4 students plus an adult leader, come visit for about 10 days. This was sort of restarting a youth visit program that had been ongoing since 1979, and which I was involved in as a kid, as a host family. And it kind of stopped in 2018, and we had the pandemic, and so we were trying to get it restarted again. So it was really wonderful to have the students come visit, and I guess we'll go to the next slide. Well, one thing actually, let me just mention real quick, is that one of the things that one of the programs we're working, potential projects we're working on is trying to do a pen pal program with high school students in our local schools, and perhaps something that can be replicated with other sister cities in our program. So, and as well as exchanges with small businesses, arts, and education collaborations. So a lot of potential there. Okay, so next slide. And just a few photos. This is when we had a formal sort of recognition celebration in front of Matsumoto Castle. This is the national treasure built in the 1500s, 400-year-old castle, 15th century, I should say. And anyway, so this is when Mayor Mendenhall presented the miniature statue, sculpture of the ninth and ninth whale, which is well received, and of course we received a tour of inside of the castle. And then next slide, please. Also, this is when we were received arriving at the city hall. It was pretty overwhelming. I feel like the entire city staff came out and was cheering for the delegation when we arrived, got off the bus. It was really, really wonderful. And then, of course, members of our delegation had lots of opportunities to tour the city and see a lot of the local vendors and just what the city atmosphere is like. And then next slide. I think that, okay, and this is just a photo of when the youth delegation came in July last year with their host families. So they all stayed with local host families for that 10 days and kind of picking up the tradition that we had done for many years. So I'll hand it back to Katie.
Next slide, please. All right, so moving on to our sister city in Chernivtsi, Ukraine. Like I said, we were able to get reconnected with them. We did have some conversations up until, let me back up. Up until this past year, we have not really had contact with our sister city in Chernivtsi, Ukraine, for obvious reasons. And this body and the mayor sent a letter to them on the 1-year anniversary of the war. And later they reached out, and so we've been in contact ever since. But for a while, the only way that we could really engage with this community was through the refugee community from Ukraine here in Salt Lake City and in Salt Lake County. And our board member who works with, who is on the Ukraine committee, she had mentioned that one of the challenges folks were facing was getting a driver's license because they couldn't get a translator to sit with them. So we worked with her and some folks at the state level, had some conversations. Ultimately, the issue was resolved actually at the federal level, but we were really grateful that we could try in any way that we knew how to show up for the community as best we could. A few months ago, or late last year, Mayor Mendenhall met with Mayor Roman Klitschuk, who is the mayor of Chernivtsi. They met via Zoom. They talked about celebrating 35 years of our relationship with them. We are their oldest sister city, and they are hoping to actually visit us later this year. So we will be working with, of course, the administration and city council to welcome them. And then, of course, we're talking about a pen pal program with them as well. Next slide, please. And then we have a new consul general for Peru. He is based out of Salt Lake City. Mayor Mendenhall and Consul General Chicada met and chatted about our shared Peruvian folks who live in Salt Lake City. And we are working with the Consul General to make connection with Trujillo's local government to get a pen pal program going there as well. Next slide.
Okay, and then just updates on other relationships. With Ijevsk, Russia, we have not had much contact at all with our sister city in Russia because of the war going on. However, with Keelung, Taiwan, we have we acquired a number of photo albums of past engagements from Miss Margaret Yee, and she was a community member really involved with this relationship for many years, and so we were able to, as part of our ongoing process to digitize and preserve records, we were scanned all those images to keep and to to preserve. But however, that relationship also is on hold for now because of staff changes and sort of capacity limits in Keelung. Next slide, please.
Okay, that's it. Any questions?
Sorry, Councilmember Petro.
Thank you. I love it. I've got a pen on the board.
Good.
Especially at a time when we have failed to learn from history and are replicating really dreadful errors about isolationism. I appreciate programs like this that allow us at the local level to hopefully mitigate that for our residents. That said, I think it's a program that, especially justifying to constituents and neighbors like mine, I need good policy backing for it. And so, I would like to even see this expanded. We still are very heavily engaged in European and developed Asian places. We know that South America is not very well represented. I mean, we got Peru, right? But come on. We've had 2 Argentines on the council now, and so we just know that as the world develops, there are other opportunities. We see this in the Peace Gardens as well, right? So, do we have anything like a strategic plan? Something like this needs to, one of my concerns about the Japan trip was that it didn't feel like we had a lot of time to budget for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or to make the case to constituents why, in the middle of all these things, we were doing it. And so do we have a strategic plan about what to expect budgetarily, programmatically, to make sure that we're being really strategic in the way we not only allocate resources to this program, but also in the way we make the cases to constituents?
There's no strategic plan at this time. We have a budget that we are working on, but I would welcome a conversation with this body to talk about what your desires are from the program. We do have an outline, kind of 5 buckets that we look through and we work through when it comes to the program. 5 buckets is not a strategic plan, but if it's helpful, we're looking through an economic, cultural, educational, humanitarian, and sustainability lens. And so anything that we do would fall into those categories. And we are having conversations, particularly, I would say there are a lot of really cool things that came from our trip to Japan. One of the really cool ones was talking about how we connect actually small businesses in Salt Lake to small businesses in Matsumoto. And we're talking with some community partners right now about what we can do with that going forward.
I'd really love to push for this because I do see this as, it was important, and now with our current climate, I think it's doubled in importance for our city. But I do think with the demands on our time at City Hall, the resources, with things pulling us in other directions, I think that we have to double down on the strategy to make sure that we can keep I don't want people thinking that we're going on junkets, that you get elected to council and it means you get trips to foreign lands to do whatever you want. There is good policy here. We need to make the case strategically.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilmember Mono.
I don't disagree with that, Councilmember Petro. I think that it is something that our constituents deserve an explanation for, but I do, having been on the trip to Japan, I'll just say I think that some of those benefits that Katie was talking about, small business exchanges, aren't hypothetical. They really do happen. We learned about a brewery that has actually come to Salt Lake to do an exchange, and there's actual things that have happened from that. And so I will just say that I am open to and excited to and hope to be able to be part of the discussion about why the Sister Cities program is important. Because I think I learned quite a bit while part of that trip, and was really grateful that I could do that. And so I think that's something we should and we need to have a conversation about. But I'm really glad for the reinvigoration of this program.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 4. This is budget amendment number 5 for fiscal year 2024-2025 follow-up discussion. We have, is Jennifer joining? Oh, yeah.
Yes, hi.
Jennifer
Hi, Mr. Chair.
Bruno, Council Executive Director, Sylvia Richards, Council Policy Analyst, Greg Cleary, Budget Director, and Ben Ludke, Deputy Chief Financial Officer. And maybe not Greg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Just a few items. We got through most of the items actually that are kind of subject to discussion in the last briefing. One of the items that we mentioned briefly, but I just wanted to draw your attention to it because it's in the staff report now, is a proposed item that the administration is proposing, shifting money from vacancy savings in their personnel budget to the Advantage Services contract. Advantage Services, for those that may recall, is the contract that the administration uses for the various response teams to clean up biowaste. That the funding for that contract has gone from 5 days a week to 7 days a week, or sorry, the contract agreement with them has gone from 5 days a week to 7 days a week. But when the contract was initially signed, it contemplated just 5 days a week. The administration is seeing that the 7 days a week service is really helping with keeping public spaces clean and helping with, especially with police responses to cleaning needs. So it would mean an overall increase to the fiscal year 26 budget, but my understanding is that the administration is planning on including that in the fiscal year 26 budget. So more information on that proposal was emailed to you guys, and it's also in the staff report if you want to discuss it, if you have any questions on that. I don't know if there are any questions on that item. And sorry, I'm not there in person.
That's okay.
Okay.
Yes. Can verify Jen is very sick. Yeah. Do we want to walk?
You don't need to straw poll it. I just wanted to open it to the floor for questions if you had any. But if there's no questions, that's great. We can move on.
I'm not seeing any.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair,
Councilmember Pui.
I obviously I think there is a sense of urgency about this, and that's why the administration is bringing it about right now, and I'm appreciative of that, and I hope that we keep on moving with that speediness to give the resources to get the resources that we need, very much need to answer these problems in our community. So I'm thankful that they brought it up now and they didn't wait for the budget, and I know that that's not ideal, but I appreciate everybody's support on this matter.
Thank you. There is one other council added item that that I'll just introduce now, and then we can have a follow-up briefing on it next week when we have an opportunity to write information for the staff report. There have been several different ideas that council members have raised in different aspects regarding usage of the council member communications budgets. And so we've been working with the city attorney's office to make sure that we're appropriately following the Fiscal Procedures Act with usage of those funds. There have been different interpretations in the past, and I think each year we get more clarity on what is and isn't allowed in the Fiscal Procedures Act. And it doesn't mean that you guys don't have flexibility on those dollars, very much flexibility with those dollars, but there might be some just public disclosure steps that we have to take. So I just wanted to flag that for the council. That will come up at next week's discussion. And Mr. Chair or Lehua, do either of you want to add anything to that, or should we move on?
Just that, yeah, so we're going to add to the agenda next week to talk about this, the use of the council's, our communications budget. And we had made some updates to the policy a couple years ago to try to add clarity. And I think we're probably at the point where we need to do that again and add some more clarity and decide as a group what boundaries or limitations we want to put in place.
Are we talking general council communications or our individual communications?
Our individual communications for our districts. So I just ask that each one of you think about that and think about what past uses we've had and what past, questions we've had about whether or not something would or wouldn't qualify, so that we can bring that to the discussion next time.
Mr. Chair, I think one other thing that I'd ask for, or I'd be interested in that conversation, it was, 2 years ago when we increased the council communication budget quite a bit.
Yes.
And I don't think I've used my full budget, but I remember one of the reasons we did that is because there was an acknowledgement that some districts needed more mailings because their constituents were less connected to social media or whatever. And so I'd love for the council members, if there are council members that have actually used all of theirs for things like that, then just an understanding of, is that the right number, or did we go too high, or did we not go high enough? But to me, it's been more than I felt like I've needed to communicate with my constituents, and I don't want to get into a situation where just printing a whole bunch of tote bags just because we feel like we need to.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that with taxpayer money, but I know that we discussed that some constituencies were not connected to social media or the internet the same as others, and for them mailings were important and mailings were very expensive. So I'd love an idea of if we got the number right, because if in my memory we just kind of made up a number.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I see that Councilmember Pui has his hand raised. I can see because I'm also virtual. So
Yes, Councilmember Pui. Oh, can't hear you. You're muted.
Thank you, Mr.
There you
Chair.
go.
I need to hit that button before speaking. Apparently, certainly it is one of the things that I advocated for when I joined the council, because of the communication, ensuring that the neighbors, trying to even up the communication with my neighbors, making sure that I had the resources to advocate for their engagement and participation. I've been trying to be very creative about reaching out to my neighbors, from new members that move into my district, get a letter, a welcome letter to the district, and connecting them with community councils and resources from the city, to regular mailings as much as I can. I cannot say that I used all the budget, for specific things. I could argue that some of the things that I buy to give away in some of my meetings is part of the communication budget, how we used it before over the years, and much like the West Side, Best Side shirts, that we give in the West Side, and the idea is to, for me at least, is to get more sign-ups into the newsletter, and to try to get them engaged on what we're doing here in the city, so for them to connect back. So in general, that's I would love to discuss the amount and if that's enough or not, and but I'm open to for that discussion. Certainly, I've been using quite a bit of the funding to reach out to my neighbors.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Pui. I'll just say I use all of mine. I'm happy to talk about what I use it on. Councilmember Petro.
You're really good at communication. I have a question about something else in the report, so we can keep talking about this.
Oh, okay. I think this is the end. Anyone else want to say anything on this item? Okay. Sorry? No, okay.
Can I ask then, on the second page of this report, there's a chart that is labeled use of fund balance. We were just talking about it would be helpful. Could we know at each point what the percentage was that we were over? And
yeah,
then,
we are.
And
go
then
ahead.
is it possible for us to know, and this, I acknowledge the headache I'm asking for, if this level of analysis is not possible, even with Ben's super brain, just tell me. Ben and Jen together, can do everything in my mind. But is it possible for us to know how much we spent when we spent each year of that fund balance on ongoing costs, and how much was spent on capital expenditures that were, I would expect that we would see this go up because of ARPA, right? We used ARPA several years in a row. So my extrapolation from this data, it's hard to clarify what percentage is us preempting growth with our use of fund balance and how much of it was just us doing some necessary investments because we had fund balance that we weren't anticipating.
ARPA was a big part of the context, and it was more than ARPA. There was also the CARES Act and the
Right.
supplemental COVID stimulus bills. There were 3 federal bills that all sent additional one-time money to local governments, all 3 of which Salt Lake City received some of. Adding percentages to that chart is something we can get back to you with, especially since each year the denominator changed.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
even though the dollar amounts were increasing, the percentage is different.
Yes.
So we can
that's
get you
what
that
we were-
context.
That's what we were discussing. Yeah, so any of that information, if we can compare one-time versus ongoing expenses, and if we can know those percentages, I think that helps us react with more fidelity to this trajectory.
And I think one thing to remember is that there is a healthy balance of like not holding yourself so strictly to ongoing funds, paying for ongoing needs when you have such a healthy fund balance. In my 20 years at the city, we have never had this much above our 13% target. We used to hope for 13% above fund balance, and we're at almost 21%, like almost $40 million above the 13% threshold, which is great. I think there's an opportunity to spend money on capital projects, but of course those capital projects have ongoing, maintenance costs and things like that. That said, it doesn't make sense to, put money on a credit card if you have funds in your savings account, right? And so there's a lot of balancing to do there. And I know that in our conversations recently with the mayor's staff, that they're really weighing that, having a healthy fund balance, but also wanting to really try and dial in more accurately the ongoing expenses to ongoing revenues. So
Thanks, Jen. That's why I think that additional information will help me understand more than just a raw number and looking at bars going up.
We'll work with Ben on
Thank
that.
you.
And then I just wanted to draw the council's attention to the attachment to the staff report. The administration has provided a bunch of answers to the questions that were asked at the last briefing. I didn't want to necessarily take time in the public session to go through all of those just because there's a lot of information there. But if you want to take a look at that and let staff know if you have any follow-up questions, we have time scheduled to have a follow-up budget amendment conversation next week. So let staff know. And with that, Mr. Chair, I don't think I have anything else.
Okay. Ben?
I was ready to go through the administration's responses if helpful, but it sounds like next week is better. And then I know at the last briefing, the housekeeping items weren't touched on, but we don't always
Sorry,
go
Ben,
through those.
we had discussed not actually going through all of those items one by one the way we've typically done, just because of trying to balance our time and resources. So to the extent that council members have any questions on any of those items, feel free to reach out to staff, but they're in the staff report and they'll be in the staff report again next week. So.
Okay. All right. Does anybody have any questions on any of those items at this point? Okay. Then, thank you, Ben, for being here. Thank you, Sylvia. We will move on to agenda item number 5, the fiscal year 2025-26 funding allocations for one-year action plan for community development block grants and other federal grants follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a reminder to start off that the adoption vote for these items is tentatively scheduled for April 15th. So we have potentially today, well, we do have today, and potentially if time is available on April 15th for this discussion. In terms of updates from last time, there we go. First, you approved the funding for home and HOPWA allocations as they were proposed by the CDCIP board and the mayor. And you also made changes to the CDBG housing category, which resulted in $200,000 being allocated to NeighborWorks for their home repair program by shifting funds from several other categories. Today, you have one pending proposal, which is in the CDBG public services category. And that's to move 33,000 and change from number 21 Odyssey House bus passes to number 25 Wasatch Community Gardens Green Team. The Housing Stability Division provided responses to council members' questions about these two programs in attachment C6, which is in the packets, and I also sent you an email at 3:11 today in case you need an easier way to find those attachments, because there are a lot. There were two questions about this particular potential shift, which Housing Stability provided information for. One of them is on the number of bus passes that Odyssey House would provide, the requirements to receive them, and the number that was provided last year. Odyssey House plans to provide 3,000 bus passes, 2,000 monthly passes to clients in their residential and outpatient programs, and another 1,000 day passes to individuals who are met through their outreach programs. The bus passes are provided only to low-income and extremely low-income individuals. And then just a note that this program first received its funding for this program just last year. And the latest information available for Housing Stability is that in the first 2 quarters of this program year, Odyssey House provided bus passes to 127 low-income or extremely low-income individuals. The second The second question about Odyssey House versus Wasatch Community Gardens is whether the 1-point difference between the CDCIP board scores for these two program applications is significant because they are just 1 point apart. According to Housing Stability, the score for Odyssey House's bus pass program application was higher in 6 of the 9 categories considered by the CDCIP board. But Odyssey House and Wasatch Community Gardens in general scored very close to one another. Odyssey House said that they could scale the project to the amount of the funding awarded. And the only comment that was made specifically about Wasatch Community Gardens was that a board member stated that the organization are great fundraisers and that the board preferred to recommend the remaining HUD funds to go to other organizations besides Wasatch Community Gardens. So the question would be whether you want to straw poll this item now or wait for later.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I know some of my colleagues had outstanding questions that were asked outside of these 2 questions. I guess just wanted to put a comment that in case they wanted to talk more about this or we could talk more. I know that the Wasatch Community Gardens came to our last meeting and had many advocates from the Green Team, as well as, I believe, individual communications with each of the council members as well, and those that had questions in regards to the long-lasting impact of their food distribution. So if there's no other concerns, I'm just kind of giving you time to digest that. I'd like to make the straw poll unless you have any discussion points.
I had asked the question about whether the funding was going to staff salary. I think that sort of got answered by some of the comments that we received, but I didn't know if you had any additional information on that point. Okay.
No extra information.
Okay, that's the only question that I had then. I didn't have a chance to read this additional attachment though, so I'm just trying to read that as we talk. So if anybody does have a question, that would be great.
So it's the first 2 questions that are directly related to this straw poll, potential straw poll.
We're still in attachment C6.
Excuse me?
Allison? Are we still in attachment C6?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I have a question. Councilmember Lopez Chavez, to your straw poll, can you remind me of the specific amounts that we're moving?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me pull line item. It was the full amount allocated to Odyssey House, line item 21. My straw poll that I would suggest, I'm not making it, but just so you know, I will be suggesting that the amount $33,366 be reappropriated to line item 25 for the green chain funding.
Okay, so just all of 21 goes to 25.
Correct. And just as a reminder, there's a 1 point differential between the applications. Any other questions? If not, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to make the straw poll.
Yes, I just need to read this last paragraph.
Sure. Or Allison, if you want to read the next item, I think we can jump back to this.
Yeah, if you would, thank you.
The other item is really over the large number of questions that the council members didn't have a large number of questions on some of the broader topics about housing stability and their process for allocating these grants or recommending allocation for these grants. But housing stability had a large amount of information to provide. So the question there, I think, is that given the volume of information that is provided, whether the council would like to schedule a separate briefing or alternatively small group meetings so that you can get a closer idea, review housing stability's processes more closely. So it's another question for when you're done reading.
Okay. I'm good. Any other questions about, yes?
Give you a chance to read a little more.
No, I'm good. I got it.
Did I hear correctly that HOP was going away because thanks to investments at a federal level in medical research, we've ameliorated the population of people living with AIDS to such a point that it doesn't need to be separated out?
So the current guidance from our HUD representative is that we will receive our HOPWA funding similar amounts this year, we should have our grant agreement in hand between May and June. So not
and so
this,
HOPWA,
so not
we
this
can
year.
count on HOPWA for another year.
That's the latest guidance.
Do we have any idea when should HOPWA go away? Acknowledging that all of this is so tentative and one executive order changes all of it. But do we anticipate that money would be reallocated other buckets? Or do we anticipate that they would just take it away as part, like that would just be gone?
It's hard to say. It's unknown at this moment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So the question would be whether you want to straw poll the Odyssey House versus Wasatch Community Gardens issue, or would you like to consider scheduling a separate briefing or small group meetings to review the broader program information that Housing Stability provided?
I'm happy to open it up to anyone that wants to make a straw poll.
In that case, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a straw poll to reappropriate line item funding 21 of the Odyssey House of $33,366 to be reappropriated towards line item 25, the Wasatch Community Gardens Green Team Program.
Okay. That's the straw poll. Councilmember Pui? Okay. We'll go ahead and make that switch. Any other straw polls? Okay. Then I think we're all set.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay. We are now at agenda item number 6. Report from the chair and vice chair. I don't have any reports. Councilmember Pui, do you?
No, Mr. Chair, I don't have any reports.
Okay, thank you. we do have a report and an announcement from the executive director.
Or me,
Or,
in her stead.
yes.
We have one item on here, and it's just a heads up to council members about items that we've mentioned in your check-in over the past few weeks about a legislative action that would be requesting planning division to reevaluate the number of unrelated people in households or dwelling units, and the definition of family that it exists in city code currently. Does that cover it? Is that good? Sorry.
Yes, it does. And if I may add, East Central in particular, and I know other parts of the city have similar non-conforming units. This would make these units conformed units and help us through business licensing. So it just kind of gets them legalized in the way that we've conformed them through city code.
So this will be on the council's agenda next week for your vote. And there's a memo attached if anyone has any questions. Brian Fulmer on our staff is a good contact. That's it. Good. Okay.
Okay. There are. All right, we now had tentatively scheduled a closed session. I'm wondering if any council members, and this would be to receive advice of counsel, and yeah, just advice of
Mr.
counsel.
Chair,
So
I move that we enter into a closed session to receive advice of counsel.
Second?
I have a motion from Councilmember Mono, second from Councilmember Lopez Chavez. We'll go ahead and roll call it. Councilmember Petro.
Aye.
Mono.
Aye.
Lopez Chavez.
Aye.
Dugan.
Yes.
And Pui.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. So if you have not been invited to stay on this item, if you mind stepping out, we will adjourn our work session after this item, and then we will reconvene for our limited formal meeting. We're staying in here. Yeah.